Hi guys, and welcome back to another digital painting tutorial where we'll be going over how to make this mistletoe seamless pattern. Welcome to my channel, Creatively Me with Bree, and you guessed it, I'm Bree. Before you jump into this tutorial today, make sure that you check out this video linked below, or you can click on the related link at the top of this video. Assuming that you have completed that tutorial and you have a pre-painted mistletoe, we can jump on in from here. Head on into that file and group your layers that are not the sketch. From there, you are going to duplicate the group. You are going to hide the group beneath, and the group that you just duplicated, you will click on and select Flatten. So now you have everything on one layer. Select Copy so that we can start on a new canvas. First, let's start by going over what the dimensions are. In your Actions button, select Canvas, Canvas Information. Here is where you can title your work and sign your name. Under Dimensions, we'll be working in 5,000 by 5,000 square pixels at 300 dpi. The color profile is the default, which is the second option from the top of the available color profiles. Looking at our layers, you can see that we have layer 1 available. We're going into our Actions, Add, and Paste. On layer 1 now, we have our mistletoe. Here I'm just demonstrating that the background is separate from the layer that we pasted in. And for the sake of looking organized on the internet, I am now labeling the layer Original. Next, I'm going to add a layer, move the original above layer 2, and drag the color of my choice from here over. Before I forget, if you're looking to get the color palette, head on over to Patreon now, where you can download the palette for free. And before we jump back in, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Now that I have my original layer, I am going to duplicate it so that I can put the original and the layer beneath it in its own group. I'm also going to relabel the new group to be Originals. So that way, no matter how far into the project we get, we always have our original two layers. Selecting the duplicated original, I'm going to add a layer and move it beneath the original and fill it with the charcoal gray. Now we're going to duplicate that layer again. Now we are going to rename them. This one will be 1, and the mistletoe layer beneath it will be renamed 2. Keeping layer 2 selected, I'm going to hide the layer 1 mistletoe. Using the transform tool, I'm going to rotate and move mistletoe until it's close to the edge but does not bleed off of the edge. Then I select layer 1, and I'm going to use the transform tool to vertically flip as well as horizontally flip. From there, I rotate the mistletoe and place it just so that it doesn't overlap with the mistletoe, but it also doesn't bleed off the side of the canvas. Now I combine those two mistletoe layers into one. Using the transform tool, I turn on my snapping settings. When I realize it doesn't work, I also turn on my magnets. And then I make sure that it is perfectly centered. Heading back into layers, I am going to select layer 2 and layer 5 and select group. I'm going to show you why grouping is so important. If I were to grab only layer 2, then you can see that the transform tool does not grab the entire canvas. And if I select layer 5, it grabs the entire canvas. However, it's missing the mistletoe. So I end up making them into a group and selecting the group so that both are selected and are able to be moved and used at the same time. Duplicate that group so that now you have 2. Make sure you hide 1, and now we're going into our transform tool, making sure that we are on uniform and that we have both snapping and magnets on. To begin, we'll be sliding from the bottom to the top. These yellow lines indicate that they are mathematically in the correct spot. However, I still like to double check just in case that the images make it all the way to the edge of the canvas. Heading back into the layers, we are going to select the top group and also make it visible. And now we'll be moving from top to bottom until we get those lines snapped into place. Now that we see those yellow lines, I'm going to deselect. I am, however, still going to go in and double check that everything is lining up mathematically as it should. Heading back into layers, we now have half and half. And that's because when we slid the image up and the image down, it was cut in half. So now we're going to drag our layers up into one group and combine the like layers. We can now delete this group as there's nothing inside of it. Now we can see that there is a gap and an area that we can put more mistletoe. Heading back to our originals, I'm going to duplicate the original mistletoe and bring it up into a new group. Now we do a little bit of art Tetris. Selecting the mistletoe with the transform tool, I turn off my magnets and snapping so that I can rotate easily without the interference of those settings. I end up turning until I figure out which way I want the mistletoe to go, and I resize until it fits properly where it does not overlap with any of the other elements that are currently on the canvas. Now that I am pleased with the way that it's placed, I'm going to combine the mistletoe layers. Now I can see that I have gaps on either side. So we are going to do what we did earlier and duplicate this group. Before we moved top to bottom and bottom to top, this time we'll be moving from right to left and left to right, making sure that we have our snapping and magnets on. And as always, double check that the image actually makes it to the edge of the canvas and that all is well. Now we can grab our other layer, make sure that it's visible, and now we are going to swipe from left to right. Make sure that it lines up properly. You can see here that I am moving back and forth and just making sure I really am placing it in the exact spot it needs to be. And as before, I double check everything is lining up appropriately. And now we have visual of the open area we need to fill. But first, we need to move our halves up into being on one layer. So mistletoe all on one, and that dark charcoal background on one layer as well. I can now delete the empty group there. I am going to go back to my originals. I'm going to duplicate the mistletoe, and I'm going to bring it up into the new group. And now I'm going into my transform tool, make sure I have my settings appropriate so that I can start to rotate and fit the mistletoe into the space so that there is no overlap of any of the elements. And with everything else, here's me double checking there is no overlap with any of the leaves with the other mistletoe on the canvas. I'm going to combine all the mistletoe together, and technically I could stop here. I'll show you what this design looks like, and then I'll show you how I would take it up just a notch. So now we are going to duplicate this mistletoe layer 5 times. One of those layers I'm going to hide, and that one will be our backup. Heading over to the transform tool, I'm going to turn on snapping and magnets. Now we're going to be resizing. Similar to the rest of the projects, we're going to do opposites, so one corner to the opposite corner, like so. Grabbing the next layer, transform, and slide until it resizes in the opposite corner. And there we have it. There's nothing wrong with this design. You might prefer some of the bigger gaps that are happening, but I'm going to show you what I preferred to do instead. First, let's combine all those layers so now we have the design on one layer altogether. We can now move this down into our original so that we have a copy of it in case you want to return to it. Now I'm going to turn on the layer that we began with, which was this. Here I'm going to add a new layer so that I can fill in these darker spots. Heading into our color palette, I'm going to select the darkest green, and going to our brush library under calligraphy, I'm going to use the amended blotchy brush that we made in order to create the leaves for the mistletoe in the original mistletoe tutorial. Any leaves that you add now that you decide that you want to paint in need to remain inside of the canvas, the same way that we did at the beginning. And here's what it looks like when it's all filled in. Since I still have these new leaves on their own layer, I'm going into adjustments and I'm going to increase the saturation and the brightness so that there's just a little bit more color variation and interest for the design. And now we'll combine those two layers. And now all of the mistletoe are combined onto the one layer. And here I just wanted to demonstrate ways that you could adjust the hue, saturation, and brightness to just give a slightly different feel if you want on the mistletoe. To ensure there are no other gaps, I'm going to real quick duplicate the layer of mistletoe and only the mistletoe, and I'm going to slide it from right to left and then left to right. Here we are, same as we did before. This is me zooming in and just double checking it all lines up mathematically, and it does. There's also no awkward gaps now that I've painted in more mistletoe leaves. I'm going to take this one step further by duplicating the layer and sliding bottom to top and top to bottom, just to make sure that at all angles there is no awkward gaps for those mistletoe leaves. Since all looks good, I combined the layers so everything is on one. I make a duplicate, put it in originals just in case, and now I'm going to make sure that I have 4 copies of this design. And now, as we practiced before, we will be taking each layer and shrinking it from one corner to the opposite until it snaps into place. This allows us to get an even better idea of what the overall pattern will look like if it were expanded onto, say, fabric or on a wallpaper. And this is what the piece looks like up close. While we could stop here, I do want to show you guys some additional changes you could make. First, combine those layers so they're all on one together. Next, remember how we kept this background separate? It's so that we could change the background later, if we so choose. So for example, we could make the background a very dark green instead of gray. By sliding the color sampler around, you can test out a variety of colors at various hues as well as saturation so that you can see which colors look best and in what range. You can also slide on the hue scale, not just the saturation and brightness scale, and you can see what sort of other colors might go well. I found this very vibrant purple, and you can see it looks really nice. While this may not be traditional holiday colors, it doesn't really matter. It's based on what your preferences are and what works best for your piece. You could also theoretically, instead of the background, you could adjust the hue, saturation, and brightness on the mistletoe itself. All right, guys, with that being said, I think we made it to the very end. If you're still here, thank you so much for watching. Please make sure that you subscribe, leave a comment, and engage. And I look forward to seeing you at the next tutorial. Okay? Okay, bye.